Hey everybody, welcome back to Tim Travels. It's Terry, your host, coming to you from, I think this is Bridgewater, Massachusetts. I'm here in the Bay State. I had a couple of deliveries. Had my first delivery was over in the Nutmeg State, Connecticut, in North Haven. And then my second delivery was in East Providence, Rhode Island. That was kind of painful. Like, first of all, I only had 7 pallets, and then they wanted a $150 lumper fee. I'm like, okay, so I go get them an express code, and I said, hey, I got this express code, and they're like, oh, we need a check. And I'm like, I don't have any checks. I said, no one takes checks anymore. I said, I haven't written a check in like 3 years, which might be an exaggeration, but it's probably not that far off. And they're like, well, we always get checks. So finally I root around in my truck, because then they were like, well, we'll just have to charge like $50 extra. And I said I could give you a card, but it was all like, you couldn't talk to the decision maker. So anyway, I come out to my truck because it was unloaded like immediately, right? 7 pallets. But then the guy was like sorting it and restacking it and doing all this stuff. So I came and got in my briefcase, my old court bag, and I had some checks in there. But then I fill the check out. The guy's like, okay, cool, I'll get your bills, blah, blah, blah. There's a little tiny shortage, 2 cases short on one product. And so I go in and I give him this check. And I don't know if you can see this, but this check is basically blue. And the guy comes out, and I must have been in a coma. You people that are smarter than I am would know this, but these checks are issued by Regions Bank, but apparently the checks now that are like legit com checks are green, and they're issued by Wells Fargo. So, who knew? It's kind of funny though, because Wells Fargo is actually in some more hot water, some more fraudulent BS screwing over consumers. If you'll recall, Wells Fargo they were sued by several jurisdictions, including the city of Baltimore, for predatory lending on home loans. But then they did this. They had this huge settlement. Like their people were just like opening bogus accounts just to like get commissions and generate business and stuff on unsuspecting customers of theirs. So yeah, that's Wells Fargo. Anyway, today is the 8th of May. A lot of interesting stuff happened on this day. Let me back up a little bit farther. 1864, Battle of Spotsylvania Courthouse, United States Army under the command of Ulysses S. Grant versus Robert E. Lee, Spotsylvania Courthouse. And by the way, if you like visiting battlefields, this is Spotsylvania Courthouse is one of the battlefields that you can do. Like, you could literally go to 3 major battlefields in just one day if you went down there, because Charlottesville, Fredericksburg, and Spotsylvania Courthouse are all very close to each other. And also the Wilderness is in there, but I don't think there's actually a battlefield park. But the others, there are parks. There are, like national parks and stuff. And so it's a high value proposition if you're in that particular part of Virginia. So that was 1864. 1884, Harry S. Truman was born in Lamar, Missouri. And in and I'd have to I'd have to count to remember what president he was. I want to say like maybe around 33, because I think Kennedy was 35, so that would have made Eisenhower 34. I think Truman was 33, and of course he became president when the president, because he was the vice president, when Franklin Delano Roosevelt died in 1945. Now the interesting thing about Truman as vice president is Truman was not FDR's vice president for FDR's first 3 elections. So FDR won the presidency in the 1932 election, then in 36, then in 1940. And those 3 elections, a guy by the name of Henry Wallace was actually his vice president, and was on the ticket with him. So Henry Wallace was vice president for like 12 years. And then FDR, he wasn't close to Wallace. They had a little, I don't know, I don't even want to say they had a falling out, but FDR is like, hey, I want a different guy. And he picks this dude who's this guy from Missouri, who's a U.S. senator. Truman had been an Army artillery officer, I believe. I believe he was in the artillery in World War I. But anyway, so he picks him, and then, FDR gets reelected in 1944, dies in April of 45, and that's when Truman becomes the president. But anyway, Truman born on this day in 1884. In 1886, to celebrate Truman's 2nd birthday, a gentleman by the name of Pemberton, I think Thomas Pemberton, invents Coca-Cola. So yeah, 1886, and it was like Coca-Cola was like this elixir and stuff, and actually it wasn't called Coca-Cola at the time. I think it was a product of like the Pemberton medicine company or something. But yeah, Coca-Cola invented or went to market, I guess maybe this day in 1886. In 1942, in the Battle of Coral Sea, the USS Lexington becomes the first U.S. aircraft carrier that was sunk. Unfortunately, it wouldn't be the last. But Coral Sea was an important battle, even though it was kind of a Pyrrhic victory for the United States, because we lost Lexington, and then later a Yorktown sunk while being towed back to, or maybe Yorktown sunk on the way back to being taken back to Pearl Harbor for repairs from damage she suffered at the Battle of Coral Sea. But Coral Sea was important because it basically checked the Japanese invasion of Australia. So, we went down there and engaged the Japanese, and remember, this is 1942, early in 1942, because we only get in the war in December of 1941. We go down there to Coral Sea, and we check the Japanese advance in the Pacific. And really, from that point forward, the Japanese don't get any more territory in the Pacific. And shortly thereafter, there's the invasion of Guadalcanal, and we start our island hopping campaign to defeat the Japanese in the Pacific. On this date in 1945, I mentioned Truman became president in April of 1945, but in this date in 1945, VE Day, Victory Over Europe Day. Obviously, the war wouldn't end until later in 1945. Actually, September 2nd, 1945 is when the Japanese surrendered on board the USS Missouri. We dropped the atomic bombs on the 6th and the 9th of August. So anyway, that catches you up on that. This date in, let me think. This date in 1926, comedian Don Rickles was born. And on this date in 1999, what's her name? I can't remember her first name. She's a congresswoman now. Her last name is Mace, M-A-C-E. She was the first female graduate of the Citadel, the military college of South Carolina. So anyway, a little update on history. So I wanted to talk, somebody asked me this question and I wanted to get this answer out as soon as possible. Somebody asked me about being a 1099 employee of a company, like I guess they're being offered a job and stuff. And they were worried that they might have some kind of criminal or liability if they took a job 1099 even though they were technically an employee. Okay, so let me just clear up like what terms mean. If you're getting a 1099 from a company for miscellaneous income, and that's what a 1099 is typically for, miscellaneous income, you are not an employee. You are an independent contractor. Now, here's the thing. The Internal Revenue Service says somebody is an employee unless you can prove otherwise. In other words, everybody that works for a business is supposed to be W-2 unless you can prove otherwise. And there are certain tests. And I won't go into all the gory details about the tests except to say this. The issue really comes down to control, okay? How much control does the business exert over the independent contractor who's getting a 1099? And when it comes to trucking, when you see a company, and first of all, any company that says, oh hey, we'll pay you this much, you decide if you want a 1099 or if you want W-2. You pick. Okay, that's against the law. Anybody that says that, they're scam artists, right? Because no business that's abiding by the law is going to give the employee or contractor that choice. It's not up to the person receiving the compensation to determine their status. Okay, that's one red flag. Another red flag is where they say you're a 1099, but then they tell you what truck to drive, they tell you what loads to pick up, and you don't have an option, right? They tell you when you can take vacation, when you can take home time, and all the, and basically they control what you do. If they tell you where you have to buy fuel, that's control, okay? If they tell you what route you have to take, that's control. I'm an independent contractor. Actually, our company is an independent contractor to Prime, right? Prime doesn't tell me where to get fuel. They tell me where I can. They tell me where I'll save money, but they don't force me. I can buy fuel wherever the hell I want. I can go to some Shell station on the corner and fill up with diesel. Prime doesn't care, right? Prime doesn't tell me the route to take, right? They don't give me a trip solution. They don't mandate a fuel solution, a trip solution. I can refuse any load, right? So they don't control that. They can't force me to take a load. They can't tell me that I can't take home time. They can't tell me that I can't take vacation or whatever, right? And even really, when it comes to the truck, now that's a separate deal with success. But like some repairs, I'm not mandated to get, right? Like I have to abide by the terms of my lease, and Prime won't let me leave like a terminal if I'm not DOT compliant. Like if I had a tire that had a flat spot on it, they're like, you can't leave with that tire, it's not DOT compliant. The reason they can exert that control is because I'm running under their authority. But any company that controls what you do, They tell, you know, and I mean, some companies babysit the F out of people. You know, they're like, oh, you should have driven the 33 more minutes today. You know, you should get back on the road at this time. No, like even Prime, like I think one time, some jackass night dispatcher told us to get on the road, but I had a trainee and she was driving. I was in the sleeper, and it was like very severe thunderstorms out in Kansas, and she wasn't familiar with driving in very severe thunderstorms with crosswinds in Kansas, and she pulled over, but I was like, yeah, I'm cool with that, but I didn't feel like getting up and driving. And then I got a message, and they're like, you need to get rolling. Which, I mean, I did need to get rolling if I wanted to make an on-time delivery, but I also could have just said, fuck you, it's bad weather. And they can't exert that control. So, what does that mean? Well, let's say that you are truly a W-2 employee, but you're getting just 1099, right? They're not taking out any taxes or anything like that. Can you get in trouble criminally for that? And the answer is no. However, the company can get in trouble with the Internal Revenue Service and be forced to pay all the back taxes. And here's why you don't want to let a company get away with this. I know a lot of people are like, hey, you know, I'll get more per paycheck, blah, blah, blah. But here's the deal, right? The company, and let's not confuse these two like statuses or statuses with being paid under the table. Being paid under the table is when you just get like cash and you're not on the books at all. Okay, but here's the thing with a 1099. If you get more than $600, if a business pays an independent contractor more than $600 in a year, they have to file a 1099 with the Internal Revenue Service. So you're out there, you're making $60, $80, $250,000 a year, 1099, but you're actually an employee. When you allow the company to just give you a 1099, what you're basically saying is, oh, hey, I will pay the taxes that you should be paying. That's what you're saying to your employer. Because here's the thing, right? If you're 1099, you have to pay self-employment tax as well as your regular income tax. Somebody's going to pay that self-employment tax, right? Because that's the money that goes into Social Security and Medicare. When you let your employee designate you as a 1099, contractor, because there's no such thing, by the way, there's no such thing as 1099 employee. That's totally a bullshit term. That's not a thing. So when you allow them to treat you as an independent contractor, you're allowing them to get out of paying matching income tax, right? They're getting out of paying unemployment insurance to the state, and they're getting out of paying workman's comp, having workman's comp insurance for you, or paying it into the state, depending on how the state works. But in any case, they are screwing you. And here's the other thing that I want to mention. I talked to a fellow driver at Prime, and she's a trainer, and she was telling me about somebody who was co-driving with somebody who really wasn't their significant other. And the co-driver, right, not the person that was on the truck lease or owned the truck, they were kind of getting screwed when it came to, how much per mile they were getting. And I said to this person who was telling me this story, I said, doesn't Prime say something about that? And she said no. And she goes, the reason is that a lot of times there are situations where a co-driver is a significant other. And a lot of these significant others, whether they be wives, girlfriends, boyfriends, you know, domestic partners, concubines, whatever they are, right? Those people take a significantly lower salary to, quote, save on taxes. The problem with that, though, is that if you do that, you're screwing yourself out of, you know, Social Security eligibility, like how much you've paid into Social Security. You're screwing yourself out of 401k matching. You're screwing yourself if you, let's say the truck gets totaled and the person who's on the lease or owns it is like, man, I can't afford to go back into this. Now you're unemployed, right? Well, guess what? Unemployment benefits are based on your wages. So if you were only making like freaking, you know, 15 grand a year, how much you think your unemployment's going to be during that time you're trying to find another truck to get on or trying to get a new job? And here's the thing, and I know somebody's going to say some crazy shit like, oh, Social Security's not going to be there for me. Why would I want to pay into it? You know what? People have been saying that for the past 50 years, okay? And people are saying, oh, it's a Ponzi scheme. Here's the deal with a Ponzi scheme, right? A Ponzi scheme relies on new investment to pay the old investors. But the difference between a Ponzi scheme and Social Security is a Ponzi scheme can't force people to become new investors. But Social Security can force anybody that's working to pay Social Security tax. That's the difference, right? It's like, yeah, if everybody quits working, no money will be going into Social Security. But I don't think that's going to happen, right? In fact, the employment numbers were great for April. So anyway, and by the way, I think that Social Security, you know, as the population grows, more money is going to go into Social Security. This is a whole nother subject. I do think they need to make some modifications to it. I think at this day and age, people shouldn't be able to take Social Security at age 62. I think they should raise that floor up to 64. Hell, in France, they just raised it to 64. I don't think, you know, somebody should be able to start collecting Social Security at age 62. I think it should be higher. And even if they raised it by a year, or let's say they started raising it in 6-month increments to go to up to age, let's say 64 and a half, it would say it would extend the life of the fund, you know, significantly. So anyway, if you got other more specific questions about 1099 W-2 stuff, let me know. But short answer is, you're not going to get in trouble, but you are going to have to pay more taxes. And oh, by the way, if you aren't at 1099 status and you're not making those quarterly tax payments, that's cool as long as you don't owe money at the end of the year. Because then if you owe money at the end of the year, you're going to get penalized, plus there's going to be interest charges. So you want to make the quarterly payments. I mean, that's just the wise thing to do. So anyway, thanks for watching. Appreciate everybody, and we'll talk to you soon. Bye.